The chapel smelled faintly of lilies and polished wood, the kind of scent that lingers in places where people come to say goodbye more often than they'd like. I sat in the front row, hands folded tightly in my lap, staring at nothing and everything at once. It had been 8 days since Daniel passed. 8 days since my world, carefully built over 5 decades, collapsed into silence. People filled the pews behind me, neighbors, old friends, former colleagues, even people I barely recognized anymore. Daniel had always been that kind of man, the kind who made people feel seen, remembered, valued. I suppose that's why they came. But none of it felt real. Not the soft music. Not the murmured condolences. Not even the framed photograph of him beside the urn, smiling, alive, as if he might step down at any moment and tell everyone this had all been a misunderstanding. I clutched the small leather purse on my lap tighter. Inside it was the envelope. The envelope Daniel had given me 3 days before he died. "Keep this safe, Catherine," he had said, his voice thin but steady. "Don't open it until after the memorial." I had promised. I always kept my promises to him. But now, sitting there in that quiet chapel, something about that envelope felt heavier than paper should. Like it already knew something I didn't. I didn't notice my son moving until he sat a few rows behind me. Ethan. My only child. I used to recognize his footsteps anywhere. Now they felt distant. He leaned toward his wife, Vanessa, her black heels crossed neatly, her posture perfect, too perfect for a day like this. Then he whispered, soft, careful, but not careful enough. "She won't stay long," he said. "Once this is over, she'll leave. And then the house is ours." For a moment, I thought I had imagined it. My breath caught in my throat. The words echoed again in my mind, clear, sharp, undeniable. "The house is ours." Vanessa didn't react with shock. She smiled. Not wide. Not obvious. Just enough. My fingers tightened around my purse, so hard my knuckles turned white. A cold wave moved through my body, starting in my chest and spreading outward until I felt almost numb. I didn't turn around fully. I didn't confront them. I just sat there, staring ahead, while something inside me quietly cracked. 52 years. 52 years in that house. Every corner of it held a memory. The kitchen where Daniel burned our first attempt at dinner together. The staircase where Ethan took his first steps. The backyard where we planted trees that now stood taller than the roof. And my son, my own son, was already planning what would happen after I was gone. Had he been waiting? The thought made my stomach twist. Had they both been waiting? Suddenly, their recent behavior made sense. The frequent visits. The sudden interest in our finances. The way Vanessa would casually comment on updating the house or how much space was going to waste. I had brushed it off before. I didn't want to believe it. But now I couldn't unhear what I had heard. The service continued, voices blending into a distant hum. Someone spoke about Daniel's generosity. Someone else mentioned his kindness. But all I could hear was that whisper. That single sentence. By the time the ceremony ended, I felt like I had aged 10 years. People approached me one by one, offering sympathy, squeezing my hands, telling me how strong I was. I nodded. I thanked them. I said the right things. But inside, something had shifted. "Catherine," Ethan said gently as he finally approached me, placing a hand on my shoulder. I flinched. He noticed. Just slightly. "Let me drive you home," he continued. "You shouldn't be alone tonight." His voice sounded caring, convincing. If I hadn't heard him earlier, I might have believed him. "I'm not going alone," I replied calmly. "Margaret is taking me." Margaret, my oldest friend, looked surprised, but she quickly recovered and nodded. "Yes, of course," she said. Ethan hesitated. Vanessa's eyes flickered between us. "We already prepared dinner," she added smoothly. "We thought it would be easier for you." I met her gaze. For the first time, I really looked at her. Not as my daughter-in-law, not as family, but as someone standing on the other side of something I hadn't fully understood until now. Another time, I said firmly. The softness in my voice was gone. Ethan noticed that too. A brief flicker of irritation crossed his face, gone almost instantly, replaced by that same practiced concern. "All right," he said, "but call me if you need anything." I didn't answer. Margaret and I walked out together. I could feel their eyes on my back, burning into me. "What was that about?" Margaret whispered once we reached the car. I paused. For a moment, I considered telling her everything. But the words felt too heavy, too real. "I need to stop somewhere first," I said instead. "Before we go home." "Where?" "The bank." As we drove away, I looked out the window, watching the town pass by like a place I no longer fully belonged to. Everything felt the same, but nothing was, because now I knew. And once you know something like that, you can never go back to not knowing. The envelope in my purse seemed to press against me, waiting. Whatever Daniel had left inside it, I had a feeling it wasn't just a letter. And for the first time since his death, I realized something clearly. I wasn't the only one who had been paying attention. The drive home felt longer than usual, even though Margaret didn't take a different route. I watched familiar streets pass by, but they no longer comforted me the way they once had. Every corner, every storefront, every passing face reminded me of a life that had felt stable just days ago. Now it all seemed fragile, like something that could be taken from me if I wasn't careful. When we finally pulled into my driveway, I didn't move right away. My eyes settled on my house, standing quiet under the fading evening light. It looked exactly the same as it always had. The pale blue shutters Daniel insisted on repainting every few years. The wraparound porch where we spent countless evenings. The garden slightly overgrown now, but still holding the shape of everything we had built together. But something felt different, as if the house already knew. "You want me to come in?" Margaret asked gently, her hand resting on the steering wheel but her attention fully on me. I shook my head. "No. I need a moment alone." She studied me for a second longer than usual, then nodded. "Call me if anything feels off." "I mean it, Catherine. I will." I stepped out of the car, closing the door softly behind me. The gravel crunched under my shoes as I walked toward the porch. The swing moved slightly in the evening breeze, creaking the way it always did, and for a second, I almost expected to see Daniel sitting there, waiting for me. But of course, there was no one. I reached into my bag and wrapped my fingers around the envelope again. Still sealed. Still waiting. Not yet. I slid my key into the front door lock, but the moment I turned it, something inside me tightened. The lights were on. I froze. I was certain I hadn't left them on. A faint scent drifted through the air as I slowly opened the door. Sweet, floral, unfamiliar. Perfume. My grip on the door handle tightened. "Hello," I called out, already knowing the answer. Vanessa appeared first, stepping out of the kitchen as if she belonged there. She was wearing an apron, my apron, the one I had kept hanging by the stove for years. "Catherine," she said with a practiced smile, "we were worried when you didn't come with Ethan." My chest tightened. "We," I repeated quietly. "Ethan's upstairs," she replied, as if that explained everything. "He's just sorting through a few things." Sorting through things. My things. Daniel's things. I stepped fully inside, closing the door behind me with a soft but deliberate click. "I didn't give permission for that." Her smile flickered, just for a second. "We thought we'd help. It must be overwhelming for you." Before I could respond, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Ethan came down carrying a box. I recognized it immediately. Daniel's sweaters. Right on top was the dark gray one he wore every winter morning while drinking his coffee by the window. My throat tightened. "What are you doing?" I asked. Ethan set the box down like it didn't matter. "Just organizing. A lot of this stuff doesn't need to stay here. It's better to clear space early." "Clear space," I repeated. "For you," Vanessa added quickly. "Less clutter." less emotional weight. I stared at them both. They weren't even hiding it. Put them back, I said. Ethan sighed, like I was being difficult. Mom, be realistic. You don't need all of this. The house is too big for you now anyway. There it was again. The house. Always the house. This is my home, I said, my voice steady despite the storm building inside me. And those are my decisions to make. They exchanged a glance. That silent communication between them felt colder now that I understood it. We're just thinking ahead, Vanessa said. There are wonderful communities nearby. Comfortable, safe. I'm not moving. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The firmness in it surprised even me. Ethan's expression changed slightly. Less patient. Less gentle. You can't manage this place alone, he said. Maintenance, taxes, everything, it's too much. I've been managing it for years, I replied. Long before you decided to take an interest. Silence filled the room for a moment. Then Ethan tried again, softer this time, but there was something underneath it now. Pressure. We're trying to help you. No, I said quietly. You're trying to take control. That landed. Vanessa's smile disappeared completely now. That's not fair, she said sharply. Isn't it? Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. Mom, listen. The will hasn't even been read yet, but we both know how this works. The house. Stop. The word cut through the room. He froze. I'm tired, I continued, and I want you both to leave. They didn't move. For a moment, I thought they might actually refuse. Then Ethan picked up the box again, setting it back down harder than necessary. This conversation isn't over, he said.
No, irraplia.
It isn't, but it's not happening tonight. Vanessa grabbed her purse, her movements sharp now, controlled, but clearly irritated. As they walked toward the door, she turned slightly. You're not thinking clearly right now. I met her eyes. I've never thought more clearly in my life. The door closed behind them.
Hard.
The silence that followed was almost overwhelming. For a moment, I just stood there listening. To the house. To the absence of Daniel. To the echo of everything that had just happened. Then slowly, I walked into the living room and sat down. My hands trembled as I opened my purse. The envelope. It was time. I carefully broke the seal. Inside were several documents. Neatly arranged. Organized. Exactly like Daniel always did things. The first paper I pulled out made my breath catch. The deed. The house was entirely in my name. Not shared. Not divided.
Mine.
I flipped to the next document. A bank account. One I had never seen before. The amount inside it was more than enough to maintain the house for years. My hands began to shake harder now. And then, the letter. I unfolded it slowly. Catherine, it began. And as I read, tears blurred the words almost immediately. He had known. Everything.
Ethan.
Vanessa. Their plans. Their intentions. He had seen it before I did. And he had protected me, even after he was gone. By the time I reached the end, I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. But this wasn't just grief. This was something else. Something stronger. I folded the letter carefully, pressing it against my chest. The house felt different now. Not vulnerable. Not threatened.
But solid.
Like it was standing with me. I understand now, I whispered. And for the first time, since the chapel, I didn't feel helpless. I felt ready. I woke up before the alarm, though I didn't remember setting one. The house was quiet in that heavy, early morning way, where even the walls seemed to be holding their breath. For a moment, I lay still, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember what had pulled me out of sleep. Then I heard it, a car door slamming outside. Sharp. Certain. Not accidental. I turned my head toward the clock on the nightstand. 7:18 a.m. Too early for a casual visit. A strange calm settled over me, the kind that comes not from peace, but from understanding exactly what you're about to face. I already knew who it was. I got out of bed, slipped on my robe, and moved to the window. Pulling the curtain aside just enough to see without being seen, I watched Ethan step out of his car, Vanessa right behind him. They didn't hesitate.
No pause. No uncertainty.
They walked toward the house like they belonged there, like it was already theirs. I let the curtain fall back into place and stood there for a second longer than necessary. A week ago, I would have felt nervous, maybe even grateful that they were checking on me. But now, with Daniel's letter still fresh in my mind, everything looked different.
Clearer. Colder.
I dressed quickly, deliberately choosing a dark green blouse Daniel used to say brought out my eyes. Not because of vanity, but because I wanted to feel like myself again. Grounded.
Present.
Not fragile. By the time I made it downstairs, I heard the front door open. They used the spare key. Of course they did. Mom, Ethan's voice echoed through the hallway, overly cheerful. We brought breakfast. I stepped into the kitchen and found Vanessa already unpacking boxes onto the counter, moving with practiced ease, as if she had done this 100 times before. Croissants.
Coffee.
Fruit. Everything arranged neatly, like a performance. Catherine, she said with a bright smile. We thought you shouldn't be alone this morning. I leaned against the doorway for a moment, watching them. You let yourselves in? I said. Ethan waved it off. We didn't want to wake you. That wasn't the reason. We all knew it. I walked past them without another word and poured myself coffee, reaching automatically for my favorite mug, the one with a faded photograph of Daniel and me printed on it. Our anniversary. 20 years ago. We looked younger.
Happier. Certain.
I sat down at the table. What is this really about? I asked. They exchanged a glance. That look again. Ethan took a seat across from me, folding his hands like he was about to conduct a meeting. We need to talk about practical things. There it was. Like what? I asked, already knowing. Vanessa sat beside him, crossing her legs neatly. Your living situation. I let out a quiet breath through my nose. My living situation is fine. For now, she said smoothly. But this house is too much for one person. The stairs, the upkeep. I hired someone for the yard. I interrupted. And I've been handling the rest just fine. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his tone shifting. Less warm now. More controlled.
Mom, listen.
Dad is gone. Things are different now. Yes, I said. They are. He didn't catch the meaning behind that. Or maybe he didn't want to. We've been looking at some assisted living communities, Vanessa continued. There's one not far from us. Very comfortable, very modern. I'm not moving. The words came out sharper this time. Ethan exhaled slowly, clearly trying to remain patient. You're not thinking long-term. No, I said. You are.
Silence.
A brief one, but heavy. Then Ethan changed direction. The will reading is next week, he said casually, though there was something tense underneath it. We should start thinking about what comes next. The house, especially. Of course. Always the house. What about it? I asked. Vanessa's eyes lit up slightly. The market is incredible right now. Properties in this area are selling for far more than they used to, with a few updates. You've already spoken to a realtor, I said. It wasn't a question. Ethan hesitated. Just for a second. Just to understand options, he said. I nodded slowly, as if that made sense. But inside, something hardened. I notice some things are missing, I said calmly. Daniel's fishing set, his compass, a few other items. Ethan shifted in his chair. I took a couple of things. Keepsakes. Without asking me, he didn't answer, because there was no good answer. Mom, he said finally, his voice tightening, you're making this harder than it needs to be. This house is worth a lot of money. That money could help take care of you. There it is, I said quietly. What? The real reason. Vanessa's expression sharpened. That's not fair.
No. Irraplia.
What's not fair is discussing where I should live while I'm still standing in my own kitchen. Ethan's patience cracked. Everything here is going to be shared anyway, he snapped. That's how it works. I looked at him, really looked at the man he had become, and for the first time, I didn't recognize him. No, I said softly. That's not how it works. He frowned. What does that mean? I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I stood up slowly, placing my hands on the table. I want you to leave. Vanessa blinked. Excuse me? Take your breakfast, I continued, and leave. And put the key on the counter. Ethan stared at me like I had just said something absurd. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. The room shifted. You could feel it. The balance of power, something they thought was already theirs, slipping. You're not thinking clearly, Vanessa said again, but there was no softness left in her voice now. I heard you, I said. Both of them froze. In the chapel, I continued. I heard exactly what you said. Ethan's face strained of color. Vanessa didn't move. She won't stay long. The house will be ours. I repeated the words calmly. Do you remember that? Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. That's not what we meant, Ethan said quickly. Then what did you mean? He didn't answer. Because again, there was no answer. Leave, I said one last time. This time, they didn't argue. Ethan grabbed his jacket, his movements sharp now, controlled anger barely contained. Vanessa followed, her expression cold, calculating, already thinking ahead. This isn't over, Ethan said at the door.
No, irraplía.
It isn't. They left. The door slammed. And just like that, the house was quiet again. But it wasn't the same quiet as before. This one felt earned. I stood there for a long moment, letting the silence settle around me. Then I walked to the counter, picked up the spare key, and placed it in my pocket. By noon, the locks were changed. By evening, I had called Daniel's lawyer. And by night, I sat alone in the living room, his letter in my hands again, reading it slowly, carefully, letting every word sink deeper than before. They thought I was alone. They thought I was weak. They thought they could wait me out. They were wrong. And in just a few days, they were going to find out exactly how wrong. The morning of the will reading arrived with a strange sense of clarity. Not peace, no, I wouldn't call it that, but something steadier, something sharper. Like the moment before a storm finally breaks. I woke early, long before the sun fully rose, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened over the past week. The whisper in the chapel, the confrontation in my kitchen, Daniel's letter. Every moment had led to this one. I got up slowly and chose my clothes with care. A deep blue dress, simple, elegant, one Daniel had always liked. I didn't do it for anyone else. I did it because I wanted to walk into that room as myself. Not as a grieving widow, not as someone to be managed or moved or convinced, but as Catherine. By the time I arrived at the lawyer's office, Ethan and Vanessa were already there. Of course they were. Sitting side by side, polished, composed, as if attending a business meeting instead of something that should have been deeply personal. Vanessa gave me a small, controlled smile. Ethan stood up and leaned in to kiss my cheek, the gesture feeling more like habit than sincerity. Mom, he said, studying my face. You look better. I am, I replied. That seemed to unsettle him slightly. We were led into a conference room where everything was already prepared. Documents laid out neatly, chairs positioned with quiet precision. Mr. Caldwell, Daniel's attorney for over 3 decades, greeted me with a respectful nod before glancing briefly at Ethan and Vanessa. He understood the tension in the room. I could see it in his eyes. Shall we begin? He asked. I nodded. Ethan leaned back in his chair, confident. Too confident. Vanessa sat perfectly still, hands folded, eyes alert. They believed they already knew how this would go. That was the thing about certainty. It makes people careless. Mr. Caldwell began reading, his voice steady, professional, detached from the emotions hanging in the air. He went through the formalities first: names, dates, standard legal language. Ethan shifted impatiently beside me, clearly waiting for the part that mattered to him. And then it came. The residential property located at 27 Hawthorne Lane, Mr. Caldwell read, is to be transferred in its entirety to my wife, Catherine Hale, to do with as she sees fit. Ownership has already been legally reassigned to her sole name prior to my passing. Silence. Complete and absolute. For a moment, no one moved. Then Ethan leaned forward sharply. What? Mr. Caldwell didn't pause. Additionally, a separate financial account has been established in Catherine Hale's name, designated exclusively for the maintenance and preservation of said property. That's not right, Ethan said, his voice rising. That's not what he told me. Mr. Caldwell finally looked up. There is no error, Mr. Hale. These documents were finalized and verified. Ethan grabbed the papers, scanning them quickly, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to something much darker. Vanessa leaned in beside him, her calm composure cracking just enough to reveal the panic underneath. This was done recently, Ethan said. He wasn't thinking clearly. He was sick. He was of sound mind, Mr. Caldwell replied firmly. There are medical confirmations attached. Ethan turned to me then, searching my face for something: support, agreement, weakness.
He found none.
Mom, he said, softer now but strained. You can't let this stand. This isn't fair.
Fair.
The word echoed in my mind. Fair. I repeated quietly. We had plans, he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. There it was. The truth. What kind of plans? I asked. He hesitated. Vanessa's hand touched his arm, a silent warning. But it was too late. You know, he muttered. Renovations. Selling. Making things easier for you.
For me, I said.
Yes. I held his gaze. Or for you. Silence again. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat slightly and reached for another document. There is one additional statement your husband asked to be read if any disputes arose. Ethan stiffened. What statement?
I didn't stop him this time.
Read it, I said. Mr. Caldwell nodded and began. If my son questions these decisions, it confirms what I came to understand in my final months, that he has begun to see this home not as a place of family, but as an opportunity. I overheard conversations about relocating Catherine against her wishes, about selling the house for profit. This home is her security, her history, and it will remain hers alone. Every word landed like a stone. Ethan's face went pale. Vanessa looked away completely now. He misunderstood. Ethan said quickly, but there was no conviction left in his voice. We were just talking.
You were planning, I said. No.
I heard you, I interrupted. In the chapel. That stopped him.
Completely.
She won't stay long. The house will be ours, I repeated calmly. The room felt smaller. Tighter. You weren't supposed to hear that, he said before he could stop himself.
Exactly.
I stood up slowly, gathering my bag. I think we're done here. Mom, wait, Ethan said, panic creeping into his voice now. We need to figure this out.
No. Iraplia.
You need to accept it. Vanessa finally spoke, her tone sharp despite her attempt to keep it controlled. This can be contested. It can, Mr. Caldwell said evenly, but it would not succeed. Ethan looked between us, his certainty completely gone now, replaced by something unfamiliar. Loss of control. You're choosing this, he asked me, over your own son? I paused, and for a moment I allowed myself to feel it fully. The hurt, the disappointment, the years of not seeing what was right in front of me. I'm choosing myself, I said. The words felt strange, but right. I turned and walked out of the room before he could say anything else. Behind me, I heard him start to speak, then stop. He didn't follow. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, like something that had been pressing on me for days had finally lifted. I stood there for a moment, letting the quiet settle around me, then walked to my car. As I drove home, I realized something. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It never really was. It was about being seen, about being respected, about not disappearing just because someone else had decided my time was over. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat there for a moment, looking at the house again. The same house, the same walls, the same memories. But now it felt different. Not threatened, not uncertain.
Meaning,
For the first time since Daniel was gone, I didn't feel like I was holding on to something. I felt like I was standing on it, and I wasn't going anywhere. 3 months passed before Ethan came back. Not with confidence, not with entitlement, not with Vanessa beside him and plans already mapped out in his mind. This time, he stood on the porch alone, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly tense, like someone unsure if he even had the right to knock. I saw him through the window before he rang the bell. For a moment, I didn't move. The garden had changed since that morning at the lawyer's office. I had trimmed it, reshaped it, planted new flowers where old ones had faded. The house had changed too, small things at first. The walls in the living room were now a soft cream instead of the darker shade Daniel had preferred. His armchair still stood by the window, but next to it was a small table with my books, my tea, my presents. It was no longer just our home. It was mine. The bell rang. I walked to the door and opened it. Ethan looked different. Not dramatically, but enough. The sharp edge he carried before was gone, replaced by something quieter. Something uncertain. "Mom," he said. "Catherine." I corrected gently. That alone seemed to catch him off guard. "Can we talk?" he asked. I studied his face for a moment longer, then stepped aside.
"Come in."
He walked in slowly, his eyes moving across the room, noticing everything. The changes, the details, the absence of what used to be.
"You've done a lot," he said.
"I have." He nodded, then sat down carefully, as if unsure of his place. That, more than anything, told me how much had shifted. "Where's Vanessa?"
I asked.
He hesitated. "We're not together anymore." I wasn't surprised. "She wanted me to fight the will," he continued. "Said we deserved the house. That it wasn't right." "And you?" I asked. He looked down at his hands. At first, I agreed. Of course he did. But then, I kept thinking about what Dad wrote, about what he saw. He swallowed. And about what I said. The chapel. He remembered. I didn't like who I sounded like, he admitted. Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable, but heavy with everything that hadn't been said before. "We've been struggling financially," he added after a moment. I told myself that this house, it could fix everything. That it made sense. That it was practical. Was it?
I asked.
"No," he said quietly. "It was selfish." There it was. Not an excuse. Not a justification. Just truth. I sat down across from him, folding my hands in my lap the way I used to when he was a child, and I needed him to listen. "This house," I said slowly, "is not just a building. It's not an investment. It's not a solution to someone else's problems." He nodded. "I know that now. Do you?" I asked. He met my eyes. Yes. There was something different in the way he said it. Not forced. Not defensive. Just honest. "I miss him," he said suddenly. "I miss Dad." The words broke something open in the room. "I do too," I replied. We sat there for a moment, both holding that absence in our own way. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "For everything. For how I spoke. For what I planned. For not seeing you." That last part lingered. "For not seeing you." I took a breath. "I won't pretend that fixes everything," I said. "I know. But it matters that you said it." He nodded slowly. "I don't expect anything," he added. "Not the house. Not money.
Nothing like that.
I don't want to lose you too." That was the first time he had spoken without wanting something in return. And I could hear it, feel it, the difference. We can try, I said carefully. But things will be different. They should be, he agreed. We talked for a long time after that. Not about the house. Not about money. But about things that had been buried for years. His struggles, his choices, the pressure he had put on himself to succeed, in ways that didn't actually make him happy. I listened. Really listened. And for the first time in a long time, he did too. He didn't ask for anything. And I didn't offer. But something shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of it. The following week he came back, this time with a toolbox. I thought I could fix the back steps, he said. They've been loose for a while. I raised an eyebrow slightly. I noticed. He smiled faintly. We worked side by side that afternoon, mostly in silence. But it wasn't the kind of silence filled with tension anymore. It was quieter, easier. Like something rebuilding, not quickly, not perfectly, but steadily. Days turned into weeks. Spring settled fully into summer. And for the first time since Daniel passed, I allowed myself to think about something beyond loss. Dorothy came by one afternoon with an idea that, at first, felt impossible. A trip, she said. Italy. I laughed. At my age. At your age, exactly, she replied. Daniel and I had talked about it for years. Venice. The canals. The bridges. The light.
Someday.
Always someday. Until someday ran out. But now I had time. I booked it. 2 weeks. Alone. Terrifying. Exciting. Necessary. When I told Ethan, he didn't hesitate. You have to go. Will you manage things here? I asked. He nodded. I'd like to. And I believed him. The morning I left, he drove me to the airport. Not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. Before I stepped inside, he handed me something. A small book. Daniel's handwriting marked several pages. He was planning it, Ethan said quietly. My chest tightened. Even then, he had been thinking ahead. Thinking of me. I'll take him with me, I said softly. And I did. When I stood on that bridge in Venice, looking out over the water, holding a small part of the life we had shared, I didn't feel alone. I felt complete. Not whole, not yet, but steady. When I came back, the house was waiting.
Clean.
Cared for.
Alive.
Ethan had kept his word. And as I stepped inside, setting my bag down, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. This house wasn't the end of something. It wasn't a place I was clinging to. It was a foundation for everything that still remained. That evening, I sat on the porch, the air warm, the sky fading into soft shades of gold and blue. The swing creaked gently beneath me, just like it always had. Some things never change, but I had. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like the beginning, not the end.